Hey, everybody. Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. Today's episode number 134. I'm your host, Roman Zelichenko, former immigration attorney turned entrepreneur. I am the co-founder and CEO of Laborless, an immigration tech company that automates H-1B visa compliance, and also the founder of GMI Rocket, a digital marketing agency for the immigration and global mobility industry, which brings you this show. Today, I'm really excited to talk to a fellow immigration attorney turned tech founder, Michael Hendricks, who is the CEO of Allcanza, an immigration tech company that he basically built for his firm. It kind of started out as a B2C product that sold kind of DIY application processes to clients to make it easier for them and much cheaper with attorney review. He then kind of built this out into a platform that supported his law firm's work. And then, of course, now there's some potential to expand to provide this to other law firms. We're going to talk about all of this. We're going to talk about how Michael came up with the idea, how the product was built, how it's really helped his firm scale, and what his thoughts are for the business going forward. So I'm really excited for this conversation. Before we get started, I want to give a quick thank you and shout out to the main sponsor of this episode, 8 a.m. DocketWise. So for all the immigration law folks out there, unless you're brand new to the industry, you have probably heard of DocketWise. They are an all-in-one end-to-end immigration case management platform with best-in-class immigration forms in a ton of different languages, really customizable questionnaires, industry-leading integrations, including with my product, Laborless, and great customer service. They're a really good team. I've known them for a number of years as they, grew and then sold and then changed their brand and did all these things and have continued to grow. It's been a really great core team there. What I really like about them is that they create a lot of great content for the industry. So it's not just that they're selling software. They have an ebook, they have webinars, they have a podcast, they have really great blog and more. And of course, they support things like this show to help create, additional information and content for the industry. So if you are in the market for an immigration forms platform or something broader, check them out at 8 a.m. So that's the number 8 a.m.com/DocketWise and tell them you heard about them from the GMI Rocket Show. And of course, there's a link to that in the show notes. So thank you to DocketWise. And perhaps more importantly, Michael, thank you to you for being here. So I appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. I love the fact that you shout out to your sponsors. The fact is a lot of these podcasts and other materials that are put into the world that are helpful wouldn't exist if it weren't people like DocketWise and My Case and Clio and those guys. I mean, they really do support the folks that are operating, and operators are really the lifeblood. And I think some people forget that, and operators get lost in the mix. And 42% of all immigration attorney practices are solos. And that's a very lonely and very nerve-wracking and stressful world to live in.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And, I, as somebody who practiced and now I'm on the kind of vendor side, if you will, I've seen both sides. And I think there's a sort of an assumption that all these companies are just trying to sell you all the time. They're just here for your money. They don't really care about you. And so I like the fact that I'm able to tell their story a little bit. And I genuinely appreciate them. Like, they make this show possible. And the hope is that this show does bring value to folks and brings information, allows people like you to share what you're doing, what you're building. So yeah, appreciate that thought. But this is about you, not about DocketWise, although we are grateful to them. So Michael, you're based in New Mexico. We had a chance to meet actually recently in Boston at the ALA Tech Summit, which is really awesome. So I'm excited to talk to you. Before we get into what Allcanza is and everything you've done from the technology side, I mean, first of all, I'd love to dive into your backstory. You have a really interesting experience as somebody who's born in the U.S., then at the age of 7, you moved to Mexico for your formative years, like the years when you're really kind of getting to make friends and sort of figure yourself out and culturally. So talk a little bit about that. Why did you move there? What was the impetus for your family to move there? And kind of what was it like to grow up as a kind of American in Mexico, if you will, as a preteen and a teenager?
Yeah, thank you. Before I go there, I do want to say that I see DocketWise. I know this is a shameless pitch for them, but I see DocketWise as the ones that changed the industry. I used all the technologies before them. When theirs came out, it literally changed everything. And that I'm very thankful for that, because the dreams that I have grew a lot because of what I did with them, working, using their system. So anyway, my parents, my dad has been a pastor for 50 years, over 50 years, no, 50 years now. And he was a pastor locally in various parts of the Southeast for years. A youth pastor, music pastor, principal pastor, lead pastor. And I think it was 1986, he felt called into missions to take the gospel to other countries. And some people don't see the same as we do, right? And that's fine. But his original mission field that he was called to, he felt like, was Mexico. And so in 1990, we moved to Mexico, and I was 7 years old at the time, turning 8. And we lived there until I was 17. My dad has been able to affect the lives of many people. My grandfather was a pastor for 65 years as well. So it's one of those things where it was instilled in me that the love of people, and by extension, the love of their language and the love of their culture, that's huge, right? And so growing up in a foreign country, I was an immigrant. And that immigration story is actually very unique, because we talk about minorities a lot in this country. I was a minority of minorities, right? There were literally, in my whole city of, when we moved there, it was 600,000 people. Now it's closer to 2 million. But when we moved there, there were maybe 5 Anglo families in the whole city. We're talking about 1990, before the devaluation of the peso, when the Mexican economy was still, we're struggling with the IMF. And so we're talking about dirt roads everywhere, water not in a lot of places, in homes. And it was a very different world than it is today. It is very developed today. But back then, it wasn't third world. It was still in the process of developing, but it was very second world. So it was a shock, even going from the Southeast, right? And the Southeast, we still have the Southeast of the U.S. There's still a lot of underdevelopment in some places, I think by choice, not necessarily for financial reasons. So people like to live country lifestyles. But it was very interesting, and it definitely molded my mind in a way to where I bleed red, white, and blue, but I'm culturally Mexican. And a lot of people don't understand that. And I'm like, but that's the way that it is, because I love, and it gave me a perspective of other people and other cultures that you don't get when you're here. I know that there are a lot of people, especially immigration operators, that I love the immigrant people. I'm like, I was the immigrant people, right? I love those people, not because of their immigrant status. I love them because God made everyone, in my opinion, and you're a human, and we're all part of the human race. And for me, your life is valuable. And I believe that your culture is valuable and your language is valuable. So it definitely changed my perspective as compared to a lot of, big old Anglos that live in the country that see other countries or go to visit for a week and a missions trip or a vacation and get a taste of culture. Mine, I was steeped in the culture. I lived it. I learned how to do rodeo and charreadas, and I milked cows by hand, and I picked alfalfa by hand. It was a different world.
Did you make friends? You were a teenager, preteen teenager at the time. Did you make any lifelong friends, or at least for a long period of time, that even after you moved back, you stayed in touch with?
Other than my family, all my friends live there. I've been here for so many years, but I'm more of an acquaintance person than I am a friend person. But as you develop those relationships, growing up, I'm in business with people that I grew up with. I have quite a few businesses down there, and my brothers live there. My 4 sisters live here, but my brothers live there. My parents still live in Mexico, in central Mexico. That's where their home is. That's where my home is. Wow. And then I went to El Salvador for 6 months, planted a church in El Salvador, and did a pastoral internship. for me, it's not even just Mexico. It's the immigrant culture, right? The immigrant life in the US, but more importantly, where you came from, and losing some of that culture when you come here and being forced to assimilate. That, to me, that's harmful. It's not helpful.
Have you been out to Queens ever? Queens, New York?
Oh, yeah. I love Queens.
Yeah.
Last time I was there, I went out at 2:00 in the morning. I was playing pickup ball, and then we got a slice of pizza.
Nice.
Boy, I love it.
It's great. And, I also bring it up just because we have so many different sort of, I don't want to say insulated, but let's say small concentrations of immigrant communities that it does feel like you do get a little flavor of wherever they're from. And it's not all, by the way, Central South America. I mean, I'm talking Central Asia. We have, Eastern Europe. I mean,
Haiti, Jamaica, Dominicans,
totally. Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So it's great. So it's nice because you do see, a sort of a transition. It doesn't feel like people come here and they're immediately forced to become whatever it is to be American. It's more like, actually, we love that folks come here and then open restaurants and then import goods so you can buy interesting stuff. It's at least in Queens, it's definitely celebrated. I think they call it borough of the world, or the world's borough, or something like that. Specifically, I don't care what Manhattan and Brooklyn have to say.
Yeah.
It is Queens. Okay, so you spent about 10 years of your life. At 17, I guess you moved back to the U.S. to attend university. What made you do that? I mean, you could have gone to university in Mexico. I mean, there's great schools there. You already had your life there. Like, what was the thought process there, if you remember?
So first of all, I think what you were just explaining about Queens is what makes America great. Not to play off of a pun. We are not a melting pot. We are a mixed salad. Yeah, and we're supposed to be a mixed salad. It's what makes us strong. It's what made Rome strong. And Rome had a strong hand, but they allowed people to keep their religion and culture. Yeah. And it allowed people to maintain an identity of self. And that's super important. As far as when I moved back for multiple reasons. Number one, because I am American. I was in Mexico on a religious visa. And so, no, we were not allowed to attend public public schools at all. Unlike the U.S., a lot of people have a misunderstanding of what immigration is like in other countries. Mm-hmm. We were not allowed to obtain free education through the schools. We were not allowed to go to, I guess I could have paid a full ride to a college down there. It didn't even cross my mind. My parents are very, they're religious and they're relational. And I say that because I'm more relational than I am religious. But they were very dead set on me attending a school that was in line with what they believed biblically. Mm-hmm. And those didn't exist. They do exist now, but they're more like Bible schools, not colleges. And so for me, I always knew that I would be, too educated, just how my brain works. And I have too many degrees. Almost went back and got my MD, and my wife was like, you're done. Don't know. I was just going to do it for fun. Right. Yeah. So coming back it wasn't really a whole lot my choice as much as it was, that's what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't very long after that I determined what I was going to do. It was no longer, I moved out of my house when I was 17. So, but it was a great experience as well. I moved to Alabama, played football. Right. And one of the things that I love, I played football in Mexico for years, American football, not football. I played soccer too, of course. I mean, come on. But moving back wasn't really like, oh, this is what I designed for my life. It was more like, no, this is what you're going to do. Access to the economy in the U.S. is a whole different thing. I've always been a worker. And so for me, making money and beginning the journey of life, finding a person that I was going to spend the rest of my life with. That was all going to happen in America for whatever reason. And in the U.S., I know Mexico is the United States of Mexico, America. But so there wasn't a whole lot of thought in my mind that went behind that. It was more of just, this is what you're going to do. Gotcha. Okay. And so you came back and just quickly, out of interest, right? I mean, you were an immigrant sort of in Mexico because you grew up here for at least
some years, and then you spent, as you mentioned, formative years in Mexico. Then you came back. Was that another culture shock, like a reverse culture shock at all?
Yeah, man. I started working in Alabama with one of my uncles, owned a siding company. There it's called Drive It, and in the West we call it stucco. It's put on a little bit differently, but I'll tell you, one of my other uncles that it was a culture shock. He would tell me to like go get some materials to help put it on the walls and stuff like that, and he'd be like, "Boy, you need to go over and get that mud and bring it over here and put it on the wall over here." And I was like, "Wait, this is a whole nother language now. I already speak a bunch of languages, but I don't know this one." And so it was a culture shock. But to be honest, a lot of people in the southeast of the U.S. act a lot like people in Mexico. They're very family oriented. They're very kind in Mexico. Everybody is very kind, especially if you have a social status. They're not so kind if you don't have any social status. And that's one of the things that I saw. But it was definitely a culture shock linguistically, being around a bunch of other Anglos. I didn't understand sometimes the humor. I didn't understand what they watched on TV sometimes. And so for me, it was a big culture shock coming back. And I don't actually remember the culture shock of going. For me, I was looking forward to that moment since the time I was 3.
Wow.
It took us 4 years to raise support to get there. And so it was like, this is where we're going. This is what we're doing. And so going, I was so young that it took me about a year to learn the language fluently at that age. I was a little slow. But yeah, I don't remember a culture shock going. I definitely remember the culture shock. For me, that was life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. And also, I guess when you're 7, you're more malleable. Like things are not as fixed, so that sort of relatively speaking, I guess the relativity of life is not quite the same when you're that young versus when you're 17. You've gone through puberty. You've had friends. Maybe you've gotten you've lived, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense. And so you came back to the U.S., right? You studied you studied, I guess, at the University of New Mexico. Is that right?
I did. Yeah.
So that was bachelor's.
Yeah, that was years later. So I made and sold 5 businesses. I did start college, went for 1 semester, didn't like the rules of the college my parents wanted me to go to, so I didn't go back. And I was like, I don't need degrees on my walls. I'm smart. I'm an emprendedor. I am an entrepreneur, and I built my first business was when I was 18. I sold it when I was 19, and so I just built business after business. And then it was actually the crash of 2006. So a lot of people recognize the crash of 2008, but it was really 2006 in the Carolinas where I was living at the time. And that's what really triggered me to say, okay, I need that paper on my wall just because I need to have a fallback. And I met my wife that same year, my future wife that same year. We got married in 2007 and moved to New Mexico at that point, because my whole family, all but one of my siblings, lived in Mexico.
Yeah.
So she was like, well, my family lives in New Mexico. So I was like, let's do it. Yeah. And so I sold one of my businesses, my last business there, and moved to New Mexico and started right into college. I went from 0 to having the JD in 5 years.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think it's a little bit unique, right? I mean, most of the people I talk to, especially attorneys who ended up, founding a company, first and foremost, they were attorneys, not business people. This often happens, and they came into business because they, as lawyers, they may have come across a problem, and they did have that spark in them that said, well, I want to try to solve this. You took sort of an opposite approach. Your gut instinct was, to be a business owner, to work for yourself, entrepreneur, etc. Can you talk a little bit, share a little bit about what those businesses were? It sounds, we're in tech. Buying and selling a business sounds like I built WhatsApp and sold it to Facebook for $18 billion. But America actually runs on small businesses of all kinds. That's, as far as I understand, the majority of employment is, small and mid-sized businesses. What did you start? What was like your first business? How did you get into it? And, maybe we can dive a little bit into that.
Yeah. So interesting statistic. I think it's the statistic is 90% of all Americans work for small and medium-sized businesses. So it is the lifeblood of the economy. So the very first one I started was landscaping.
Okay.
I got a few jobs and then had a truck, put a mower on the back and would do landscaping of foliage, but mostly it was cutting yards, and got a book of business, and then eventually was like, okay, I'm going to move on to something else, and sold the book of businesses. Meanwhile, I always had a regular job, right?
Okay.
And so I would do this in evenings, weekends, and worked for a UPS call center while I was doing that kind of stuff. Then quickly moved into, it was a really big part of consulting, right? So one of the things that I realized was that the specifically Mexican and Central American cultures in the US, if they learned English, they didn't feel comfortable in English, especially when you're talking business. And they felt like the Anglos that they were working with to get business deals were not comfortable speaking with them because of a communication barrier. So a lot of my stuff was consulting for those businesses and becoming the Anglo face on their business, of negotiating deals, making sales. So I've done all kinds. I've owned a consulting business for years. I still own that consulting business, but I did roofing, siding. So I've owned actual construction businesses. Almost everything I did was in the construction realm and consulting realms. Until I decided to go to law school. And I wasn't always on the track to necessarily go through law school. I was thinking linguistics, work for the government, CIA, something that put me in different cultures where I could, adapt and be of help. But very quickly didn't want to work for the government. So it just developed into this whole situation where it was like, okay, I can be of use in the construction industry, and my linguistic abilities just took me to a whole different level. And so moving to New Mexico was actually pretty natural. We're over 60% Hispanic here. Now, a lot of those people are Americans, born American Hispanics, the generations, some of them up, it's 400 years, right?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it is a gateway country. So a lot of people come through here, especially from Mexico and Chihuahua and places like that. So New Mexico seemed like a really good fit. Her family was here, and we were already pregnant. We actually basically got pregnant on our honeymoon. So I don't advise anybody to do that. Then you lose the whole honeymoon, right? So the honeymoon stage. But I wouldn't trade it for anything either. But it was very natural for me to just be able to help, and it put me around people that were of my same culture and upbringing. And so it was one of those things where I felt like I could also stand out as a person that lived out and shined like a light, and provide people not only help in the form of business, but also maybe help living a life that may be a little more healthy for them, a little more relational. And for me, that was a big deal.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's interesting how kind of logically you approach this to say, okay, what are my skills? What are my assets? And then also what are my interests? And how can I align those with my career? And to your point, construction's a really good one. And by the way, mostly AI proof, mostly kind of future proof. Everyone's going to need an individual to some extent to help with their plumbing, with their drywall, with their paint, with their roof, et cetera, plumbing, et cetera. So, really cool. But then to your point, I guess 2006 to 2008 crash changed people's trajectories. It's interesting because, and we won't go on to this as an aside, but so many companies end up starting during economic downturns, often because folks actually lose their jobs, right? And so you kind of went the opposite route. You said, I have businesses. I'm going to go and get an education. So you went to University of New Mexico. It sounds like you did. Was it like a 5-year joint program, kind of get your bachelor's and then a law degree, or you just sped through the bachelor's degree?
Yeah, I did my bachelor's in 2.5 years and did law school in 2.5 years.
Amazing.
And then got an MBA after that in 18 months. So it was 8 years or 7 years of just grinding. I was working 40, 50 hours a week and going to school. You're not supposed to do that in law school, but I had A's, so it didn't matter. They don't care.
So talk to me about that a little bit. So you kind of mentioned you did your bachelor's degree. You kind of wavered between working for the government or not. You ended up choosing the law school path. Did you know that you wanted to go into immigration law, utilizing the same logic of I speak Spanish, I have this experience, or were you sort of, did it come to you? Like, how, yeah, how did that come about?
So in New Mexico, it's different, right? Because I knew I would stay here and practice for a while at least. My linguistic ability would help me in any field of law, because we do have so many people who speak languages, English, Spanish, French. And so it wasn't until my second semester of law school that I was taken under a wing of one of the top immigration attorney in the state here for a while. And he gave me a job as a law intern, and I worked for him for several years until I ended up graduating law school, and then ended up working for the company that bought his company. So no, it wasn't like I was like, I'm going to law school to do immigration law. It was, I'm going to law school to be a lawyer, right? And then I'll take that skill and use it as it best suits. And really, as it best suits me. I mean, I love people and I want to help people, but I'm also a businessman, and I'm like, look, I'm here to make money too. So I'm not going to make money that's unfair or unjust, but I am going to make money. So I need to figure out what I can do that will allow me to scale. And working for others is not really in my wheelhouse. And I don't have a problem with authority. I was raised with authority, but the problem is when I have a person that owns something and they're making decisions that I'm like, that's not the way I would do it. And I have already been very successful. So, it was very soon. I came out of law school as a managing attorney for that law firm because I already had so much skill set in immigration. And I stayed with them for about 6 months, went to another more entrepreneurial law firm for about 6 months. And then I was like, bump it, Tony. I'm out of here. I'm going to start my own. And that was in July of 2015. And wow. So we have been running, the law firm that I have has been running like a well-oiled machine since then, and just producing.
Now, did you start with immigration or did you start with a variety of things?
So I did some other stuff just to get a feel for it, right? Like I did some trials, and because we don't have an immigration court in the whole state of New Mexico. And really trials in immigration court are not like trials, individual hearings, not really like doing a civil or a criminal trial, right? So I wanted to get a feel for it. I won every trial competition that I ever did through, law school. And so I was like, hey, I'm good at that. I can go in front and convince people to my side and let them see the evidence and convince them that evidence is what they should believe and so on. And so I did a few trials. I won all my trials. But I didn't like the amount of time it took to prep for a trial as compared to actually being productive, because that's, a lot of people won't agree with me on that, right? They're like, that is the production. I'm like, I know, that's like 95% of your job. 5% is the performance you do, right?
Right.
But I like things that are more, cash and carry. I can do something for you that then produces a tangible remuneration within a shorter period of time. Now, people are going to laugh today because immigration now takes forever to do anything. But when I started, it didn't. I mean, you could do an I-130 CP 601A when it came out, 601A in 2012, 2011. You could do that in less than 3 years, 2 years. And it was like, man, that's a pretty fast turnaround for something like that. And now it takes 7. So today it's different. We had to change our model a little bit, but it is one of those things where it's like, man, I know that I can make a difference in people's lives, and I know I can make good money doing it.
You're also in business school. You start your firm. You then go to business school. As you said, you finished that in 18 months. So you've got business experience. You now have this law practice. You're back in business right now as an attorney. You're finishing up with business school. I'm assuming firm's doing well. Yeah.
Yeah. We actually were the fastest growing in the state. We went from 0, starting in July of 2015. The firm that I moved from didn't allow me to send a letter out that said that I was moving firms and that the clients had options to either stay, come with me, or look for another firm. They wouldn't allow me to do it.
They knew the clients would go with you.
Well, I was the face, right? So it was like the whole state knew who I was. And so I had to start from 0, but it's okay. In the very first year of business, we did almost $1 million. So, Yeah, it grew quickly, and it's big. My marketing ability, the fact that I'd already done other businesses, I'm like, I know how to do this.
Yeah.
And so we grew very quickly. We've helped tens of thousands of people over the 10 years, and so we've been able to really make a difference in the state. Today, I'm the most well-recognized immigration attorney in the state by a substantial margin. But I do everything. Like I ran for attorney general, right? I mean, so there are multiple layers to where people see you in different ways and different faces. I've preached at, I don't know, 150 churches around the state over the last few years, where pastors have me come in and like, an immigration attorney that speaks Spanish and preaches. Whoa, this is awesome. And so there's a lot of marketing that a lot of people don't do because they either don't understand it, or they are timid, or they don't have access, right? They don't even think about having access.
Yeah, or they don't have those skills, that sort of confluence of skills where, as you said, okay, being an immigration attorney is great. Will that get you in front of a congregation? Maybe not. But you speak Spanish and you preach, you've had this experience in your life, let's get you in, right? And that's amazing. Not to say that you're there selling, but you're selling yourself. I mean, you're putting yourself out there. They can then look out for you, reach out to you if they need you. So at what point, I mean, clearly you're on this trajectory. At what point did you start thinking about the systems that you had in place? Because clearly if you've already built businesses, you understand how to make them scalable. You've built and sold them, and businesses that aren't in any way, scalable or somehow, could be operated by somebody else are really difficult to sell. So you've had that experience. Now you're doing this in the immigration field. Were you thinking about from the day you started in 2015, setting yourself up with the right technology, with the right tools and processes? Was that kind of from the get-go for you? And kind of what was that process like? First, let's just say with out-of-the-box tools.
Yeah, so I'll start back at when I built and sold my other businesses. They were small. You're talking about selling a business for $25,000, right? It's not like a multi-million-dollar corporation that you're selling, right? So it's a lot of handshake transactions and stuff like that. So no, the idea when I went into immigration was to create the best business possible for people, so that they could obtain awesome customer service, awesome results. And grow it to where it was my lifestyle business, right? $1 million, $2 million a year. It's not a bad lifestyle. And no, I started off using LawLogix. I had no intent in looking at technology. I'd never been into technology. I mean, obviously everybody's into technology, your phones and your computers, but I didn't think about building anything. But literally using LawLogix for a year and a half. At that point is when in 2016, it was the latter part of 2016, I was like, this has got to change. This is wrong. First of all, there are people coming to my law firm that use me that don't really need me, but they need help. But I'm having to charge them law firm prices for something that they don't really need a lawyer for, right? Like it's a simple I-130 back before the I-130A and the G325. So it was I-130 G325 when it was spousal back then. And it was like, man, this is just their information. All we're doing is we're glorified data entry people, right? I'm like, they're having to pay me $1,000, $1,500 for something they should be able to do for almost nothing, right? And they can get the forms online, but they just don't understand them. So how do I make this simpler? And that dream started in 2016. And really 2016, nothing like that existed. That's the same year that Simple Citizen came online. I had no knowledge of Simple Citizen. At that point, literally nothing existed in this space. But also the technology didn't really exist, not for what I wanted to do. So I kept growing and kept, making money and kept putting stuff away and investing until 2020. And then that's when I actually said, okay, the latter part of 2020, I was like, okay, I need to go ahead and move forward with this. This is, and I still hadn't heard of Simple Citizen, but I had heard of Boundless by that point. And Boundless, I think, came into existence in 2018, right? And so it was like, okay, if I'm not going to do this, because it wasn't ever meant for other lawyers to use, it was meant for my law firm to do a better job and for people to be able to use on their own. I'm like, I need to get to this if I'm going to do it. And so in March of 21 is when I started the process of the build.
Just so you know, because we talked about DocuWise earlier, they started as a company called BorderWise, which was a direct-to-consumer immigration app. And I think they launched either 2015 or 2016 as well. So
Oh, I
it's
didn't know
interesting.
that.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about how many how many people at that time were sort of having similar thoughts. And I think this is the truth throughout in history about a number of inventions. But it's really cool to think about that. So for a number of years, you were thinking about that, but you weren't really acting on it until 2021. Before I take a quick pause to say thank you to our second sponsor. At the time, in between when you first started thinking about this and when you actually started to build, right? A number of years had passed. Were you experimenting with other tools at that time? Because I think it's one thing to have an idea. It's another thing, especially in the software space, to start taking action on it. Usually a lot of folks say, I have this idea. Let me see if I can, put something together using tools that are already out on the market. Maybe I'll do some more research and see what else is out there. Like, did you go through that process of kind of looking around to see what was being built during that time?
Yeah, I actually did. So I came together with a friend of mine who owns like 20 dentist offices. So his wife's a dentist and he's a businessman. But he went to school for cybersecurity and whatever they call anti-hacking. And so and then his minor was marketing. So I came together with him and I was like, hey, I'd already done some H-1B work for him and his dentist offices and stuff like that. So I was like, hey, let's talk about this. Let's sit down and have a conversation. And so his solution was, well, we build basically like a customer facing portal that then actually uses LawLogix as the back office. Right. And I'm like, that won't work because it's so counterintuitive, even for lawyers. And so I looked down that road for a little bit and tried to plan it out. And then actually in 2017 is when I announced to run for Congress, which switched to the Attorney General's office, run for the Attorney General's office based on some pressures that I got within the party. So no, actually the thought had basically gone out of my mind until about 2019. Late 2019, early 2020. And when the pandemic hit and people were closing down left and right. And it was like, okay. And a lot of immigration offices even did that. Right. And then, so a lot of immigration offices went remote. And so that was really the impetus of, I think the technology has finally caught up, or at least it will catch up. And I may be one of the people that can help it catch up to the need today. Of allowing people to obtain these benefits without having to go to a physical location if necessary. Because at that point, we didn't know how long that was going to last, right? And could have been months, could have been years, ended up being a really long time. But there was obviously a gap in the need, right? And so it was the creation of those things. And really, I credit, as much as I hate to say it for a lot of people, and I know people lost family, I credit COVID for the inspiration of pushing forward on this, and making it much more easily available for people who needed it to use.
Also acceptable, because I think, and to your point, I mean, our business did well during COVID too. Would I have wished for a world without COVID? Of course. I mean, I would never, but difficult situations put pressure on people and sometimes turn into new ideas to deal with the new reality. Part of that reality as well was everyone working on Zoom and becoming more comfortable with having professional sort of consequential conversations virtually, right? Whereas before they might say, sure, I'll talk to you about, something that's, but if I'm going to talk to my lawyer, my doctor, of course I'm going to be in person. But during the pandemic, you couldn't do that. And so people's mindset shifted.
Telehealth changed a lot. It's like the number one thing because it's such a personal situation, and pushing that to happen on a remote setting, that made it to where law, obviously the next step, right? It was so easy to move that way.
Exactly. Okay, so before we go on, I do want to take a quick pause and say thank you to the second sponsor of the show, Lawfully. So Lawfully actually started as a mobile app to help individuals and families track their own immigration cases. So just to see where it's at in the system to date, they've actually helped over 2.5 million people track over 6 million cases. So company's not been around for super long, and they've done so much work and impacted so many lives. But in 2024, last year, they saw that there were some users that were tracking hundreds of cases. And so they looked into it, like, what's going on here? And they found out that those users were law firms that were using lawfully to track cases for a number of their clients. And so they reached out to them, had conversations, and ended up realizing that there was a product to be built for law firms. So that's where Lawfully Pro comes in, which helps immigration law firms, as well as in-house mobility teams and nonprofits stay on top of cases for their clients or their employees across USCIS, NVC, DOL, EOIR, and better address the status of their cases and questions, et cetera. So they've got over 120 organizations using them. A lot of them are small, mid-sized, and solo law firms in some companies. So for folks who are out there listening or watching, check out Lawfully. The website is LAWFULLY, so lawfully.com. And then if you reach out to them because of us, tell them that you heard about them on the GMI Rocket Show. So thank you to them. Okay, so you've had this experience. You've thought about this. You're now working with your dental office client, and he's given you some ideas, and you're like, no, that's not going to work. We can't use what's out there. So tell me, what was the first step of building Allcanza? And it wasn't even called that. Like, it started out as a direct to consumer or business to consumer product. Talk about what that was like and sort of how it launched initially.
Well, yeah. So before we go there, I want to talk Lawfully. I was just impressed with the founders, June and Matt. They've created something to where, like, our system tracks your cases. We have the API set up with USCIS and so on. But they go a step further. They actually use algorithms to determine location, case type, and then they can give you a much more accurate, even more accurate than the government can give you in terms of tracking. So I really like their system, and they've done an incredible job.
Appreciate that.
And I like them. As far as the build, I have actually accredited a lot to my running for office. I made contact with a lot of people in the tech world. And so I moved on quickly from my client. He's still my friend, and we talk all the time, and his wife is my dentist. But I moved on to this group who was building something that is very similar to Salesforce, but it has iterative code. In other words, it can make changes based on necessity and small prompt commands, as compared to, like, Salesforce is a behemoth. They have the engine that's like the nucleus of the code, and then they create extensions in order to build out other companies, right? So, but it costs a lot because they have to hard code those extensions. This system, the way that it works is the nucleus, that's the code, it actually works in tandem with your extension. And so it doesn't have to be hard coded. It's just more pulled out. And so it made it to where you could create something much more cost effective and much cleaner, but that has the function of this super robust system. So people don't know this usually, but, like, for instance, when I think it was New York Life, they moved their whole system into Salesforce, and it cost them $1 billion to do that. 1 billion. And it took years, right? So I had held off because it was like, okay, I need to make sure that I have the funds to cover any build out. I wasn't looking for investors. I was just going to pay for it myself. And so that was really one of the things that held me back until March of 2021 was I want to make sure that I have the money in the bank. The Bible actually talks about, not everybody likes the Bible, but the Bible actually talks about, you walk past a house that's half done and you shake your head and you think, what an idiot, right? I'm paraphrasing. What an idiot. Who would do it? What foolish man starts a project without being able to finish it, right? You don't count the costs properly. So one of the things that I make sure that I do in any business is I count the costs properly before I jump in. And so it started there, and the system was growing, but it was very soon. It was about November of 21 that we had the first MVP ready to use.
Nice.
It was only naturalization. We only did naturalization. And so we started to put it on the market and very quickly got some user feedback. I did my own stuff, right? And I was like, this is just not what I wanted, right? This is not it. So I went back to my guys and was like, we got to start from scratch. And so we did, and we've done that 4 times now, to where now it's the most intuitive system you can use. The AI does everything for you. So there are some news, and I actually want to give a shout out to a couple of other places that their AI is actually more involved in the initial portion of the case than ours is. Our AI is an assistant. It's a helper. Mm-hmm. It helps you translate documents, write briefs, motions, responses. It does all that. And it helps direct your clients in the form of a law firm for consumers that help direct them through it. But it's not the system. Ours is a full out SaaS that has an integrated AI that helps. Mm-hmm. And then there's some new companies that they are only AI, right? So it's like you upload your documents, it starts your case for you, and it fills in some workflows. The problem is that only happens once you've met a person, you've determined eligibility, you've sold them the case, and now they're moving forward, right?
Right.
So ours starts from the moment that you have contact with a person all the way through the time that you're gonna remarket to them for family members and for other things, or you're going to add somebody to do taxes, which I highly advise to immigration attorneys that are especially solo pracs. Add somebody that does tax preparation in your office. You will begin to obtain and retain more clients by giving them more services that aren't necessarily related to your core service, but they're tangential to the life of the immigrant.
Right.
And so by doing that, you're able to fill in your sales cycle as well, because immigration is very one and done, right? One and done. And a person only needs so many processes. And they may have family members that need it, but it's still one and done. You have a really hard time of creating recurring. And people are like, I get referrals. I'm like, good for you, but it's not recurring, right? Yeah. I mean, you're not getting a monthly payment on these people. So that's where it all started. That was the concept.
Interesting. So it started as, I mean, it sounds like it started as a direct-to-consumer product, but you were also effectively building some kind of infrastructure for your firm as well through that.
Yeah.
Right. So, because you're starting this as a law firm, versus a different type of company that maybe isn't starting as a law firm. They're starting as a direct-to-consumer immigration company, and then they have to bring in contract attorneys to use this software, which is a little bit different, because then you're starting to get feedback from a whole new type of user, i.e. the lawyer. Yeah. And then you have to start making changes because you don't know exactly what they need when you're first building the client-facing interface. You approach this as a law firm to say, we know what's required to find a client. We know what's required to assess the client. We know what's required to sign them, to get that payment from them, et cetera. All that happens before you get one shred of evidence that you then start to feed into the platform. Yeah. So you built it from the ground up effectively as a law firm management or a case management tool without thinking about it that way, I'm assuming.
Yeah, exactly. So I wasn't. In fact, I was using DocketWise at the time. James Pittman sold me on the DocketWise system, and I was blown away because it was so much better than anything. I had used INS Zoom. I had used LawLogix. Obviously, I had used like 3 or 4 systems that were out there, and I always was like, man, these are institutional. They're cold. They're nested. For people who aren't in the tech world, they won't really know what nested means, but it's just like pieces inside of pieces inside of pieces inside of pieces, and then you're like a Russian doll. You're like, I don't even know where I'm at now, right? How do I put this thing back together? And so DocketWise made it much more clear and plain and easy. And as much as I praise DocketWise, I still saw a lot of deficits in their system, right? And so I'm like, this wouldn't work for a consumer. Like, I couldn't slap a portal on top of this either, right? And have a consumer use this directly. So I was like, how do I make it to where, and my theory is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Why? Because simplicity is the ruler of the day. I want it to be so simple that if you've only gone through, which by the way, the average education of a person that immigrates from south of the border is only middle school. So I had to make something to where it was like, this person needs a lot of hand holding, and I need a technology to do that. How do I create that? And so really broke everything down to the nuts and bolts, which our law firm wouldn't have needed, right? Because it's like, I have my operators.
Right.
They don't need this simplicity. They can use the technology and it will improve their efficiencies and help them move forward. But I want people to be able to use it. Okay, well, how do I get to where people can use it? And so this was even before our AI was born. And so the last two iterations have been inside vector databases. And these were started before AI became a real thing. So like ChatGPT came online as a very new concept, in 21, 22, but it wasn't really well known. There's still a lot of problems with it back then. And there was nobody else that was playing in that game, right? You had the IBMs of the world that had their own version in huge servers, right? But it was theirs. It was their proprietary.
Right.
And so as the build happens, then it's like, okay, now we have a vector database, which works like a neural network. You have objects and they're connected to other objects, and these things communicate and show relevance, weight, distance between them, and so on and so forth. So when we were able to start plugging in AI, our AI was like, oh, this works just like I work, right? We're good. I can move forward with this. And so we were able to take huge leaps forward over the last year and a half in order to provide it to where basically the AI does everything. We have a new interface coming out actually to where you'll be able to do a whole case within the AI interface. Mm-hmm. You ask it all the questions you want. It maintains that information, retains it, asks you for the documents it needs, asks the questions in any language in the world. Both our system and the AI does that. Any major language. We don't have all the dialects, obviously. But and within the next couple of months, you'll actually be able to answer in your native language, and it'll automatically translate that to English as well. So there's just this huge, and it's accredited to a lot to do with technology and the fact that we had the boldness to step out into that technology.
We have a comment here from a longtime listener, Marianne, who says, "I love the keep it simple, stupid principle too." It's a really good one when you're building any kind of, especially software. So in the spirit of keeping it simple, so talk a little bit about what is Allcanza today. We met at the ALA conference, right? You're obviously there sort of promoting something about it. It started off as a tool to help individuals effectively lower the cost of legal services, fill out, get applications filled out for them, and then I guess use your legal services as the law firm, behind the review. What is Allcanza today? And let's use that keep it simple, stupid principle.
Okay.
And I like that because what I love to do when I ask this question is I want the listener to envision what the product is to see if it's something that would be interesting to them.
Okay. Yeah. So Allcanza today is a true end-to-end case process management, right? So there's a difference between just a CRM and then a CPM, right? Because we do it from the time they walk through the door. You can even maintain marketing and sales tracking all the way through the tracking of the case afterwards and remarketing, and everything in between. Auto notifications, pushing people to do task notifications. So when your client has something they need to do, it alerts them to their cell phone and says, "Hey, you have a task now to do on this." But it is a system that tried to simplify everything to the point to where it didn't matter who you are or what you do, you can use it. Mm-hmm. And for law firms, this is super awesome because law firms, I think in some systems, they're either called smart forms or case sets, but ours, you literally click a button and you can determine automated eligibility for the person walking through the door, track them, automated eligibility in that they answer about 10 or 15 questions, depending on the product. And it tells them, your salesperson, whether or not they're eligible or if the attorney needs to look over it, right? Good example, naturalization. Person says, yes, I've had criminal in the past. Okay, well, that needs an attorney review. Why? Because the attorney needs to look at that and be like, okay, what was the crime? When did it happen? How did it finish? And how long ago was it, right? And so that kind of thing. But then it pushes forward through and it automatically sets it up for you. So it tells you, it has the databases for the forms. It has the documents that need to be uploaded, everything. And then when you get down, in the meantime, your client can interact with you directly on the platform. And then any questions they ask in the platform, if you have them ask them correctly in the platform, then our AI agent will actually capture the question and respond. You get a tag of that thread so that you, the attorney, can go back and say, okay, that was a good answer. Because a lot of answers, we all know, 90% of the questions are, what's my A number? What name do I need to put on my money order? Stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And so the AI actually can operate operates full legal brain, right? So it's got all the INA, it's got all the decisions, it's got every visa type, every inadmissibility, everything, right? That's related to immigration. So it can answer those questions, and then you can verify. And if you want to, provide a different answer, you can, or a more robust answer, whatever. It does all of the hardship letters, motions, briefs, responses, waiver briefs. I mean, it doesn't matter. You just put in prompts, or it just pulls data out of your process and it builds it for you within like 40 seconds. Now, it's a first draft, but the other big sauce that we have that almost no system has, there's some working on it now based on what we've done. But you go down, and normally, let's say you're doing an adjustment of status, you've got all the data, you've got all the documents, and now you're ready to put the case together. The paralegal and legal assistant's ready to stack the case in order to get it ready for attorney review. So ours, you push a button, and within now it's like 7 seconds, it stacks your case for you. So then normally what would take like an adjustment of status with 100, 150 pages, anywhere between really, really fast paralegal, 30 minutes, normal paralegals, an hour to hour and a half. Now it's done in 40 seconds. Then you pull that out, attorney reviews it, upload the final version, and then ready for submission, right? So, and then tracking. So once you get the receipt notices, you just put the receipt numbers in there, and we have the API with USCIS, so we get the maximum data, right? What we don't do is we don't have it built out for a company, for law firm financials. I do have a financial built into it, but I don't offer it to law firms. Mostly because I think there are other systems that can do that better. And so I'm like, look, just use the system that you already have.
Yeah.
But the other thing that we don't do is we don't do direct filing. And I'll tell you why. We talked to USCIS's tech team and we asked them about that. And they, in very veiled terms, said anybody that's doing that's going to be in trouble very soon because we're tracking it. And I was like, oh, because basically it's a type of a hack, right? And so the government doesn't like it when you use their systems in a hacky way. And so I was like, whoa, because we were about to do it. And so I wanted to get a clear for it before I did it. And for once and for all determined there was no digital bridge to do this like the right way. And when they told me that, I was like, nope. No, we're good. We're not going to be doing any of that. So we've left that to the side. So we don't do that. And I've had a lot of lawyers like, well, that saves me a lot of time. I'm like, yeah, but it's going to cost me a lot of money in the future.
So just so I'm clear on that, the idea is that you digitally prepare the file for them that's ready for submission, but then they have to sort of manually take it and upload it themselves into my USC, wherever they're. If they want to do it that way. If they want to do it that way, what's the other option?
Paper file.
Oh, I see. Right.
Everything is paper file, right? So it's all been paper file until recently. So
right.
The fact that we have paper file, or they can take the data from the data workflow, because the difference between our questionnaires and others is ours are based on the form. So if the first question on your I-130 is what's your A number, that's going to be the first question on your data file. Mm-hmm. And then any piece of data you put in the flow automatically fills the rest of the flows. So it goes based on, hey, you are doing an adjustment, I-130, I-138, 485, 864, 765, 864 CO. It has every one of those in there, but any data you put in automatically fills the rest of them. And then it persists. So if I open another case for that person, now I'm going to petition my child, I petition my spouse, all the data that I've put in for this person just fills the rest of the data in the workflow in the new process. And now, if you'll permit me, we're actually looking at, because my law firm and Allcanza are two different entities.
Right.
And one's a C Corp out of Delaware, and the other one is an LLC in New Mexico. And no, the law firm does not review the cases because I didn't want there to ever be a mistake about representation. So I have independent contract attorneys that review the cases that are outside of the system on purpose. But what we're doing now is we're actually creating a contractual agreement between the two entities. And so Hendricks Law will start purchasing law firms around the country. So people that are in distress, can't seem to make ends meet, people that are ready to retire, we'll be purchasing those and moving around the country in order to provide both the legal side of the immigration world with efficiencies built in, because our system is super efficient. My law firm went from 9 people to 4 people, and we process more cases today than we did before. Wow. And remote work, that's another big one. And then the last one is the opportunity for lawyers, retirees, people that are ready to move out and exit, or lawyers who are just burnt out, that they can actually practice law without having to worry about everything else. And give them vacations. Some of these lawyers haven't had vacations in years because they can't leave their offices. Right. So it's like, no, you get 4 weeks a year, go on vacation, take your family, right? And then we'll put an operator in your place from the network while the week that you're gone. We'll send them over there, we'll house them up, and they'll help while you're gone, right? That way it still makes money, still takes care of your clients. So there's a lot coming.
So that's really exciting. And for folks who are listening, please reach out. Question for you, if that's the case, and maybe you don't know yet, right? But since you brought it up, if that's the case, that your goal is to start, acquiring firms and growing Hendricks Law, and then obviously using, I'm assuming, the Allcanza system to support that. Will you continue to also sell to law firms that are maybe bigger? They don't have any interest in selling, but they really like your software. Would they still have access or the ability to, license it from you?
I won't say no to money.
Okay.
So it won't be our primary function. No.
Gotcha.
So we're not going to be like we probably won't be at like the fairs and stuff like that much anymore, because it's like, that's not the push. Right. The push is to help. So the same people that would probably sign up if it weren't for financial reasons are the same people that will want to buy, that then we can give them the opportunity. So they'll be able to use the system, do everything much better. And the lifestyle of an attorney at my firms is like, you work on the case in this way. You do the consultation and you help them know that they're eligible. Then you are answering questions from your legal assistants or paralegals or case consultants. And then in a week, your case is on your desk ready for review, so you can sign it and send it out. That's your work. And if you're doing court cases, then a lot of it can happen on the back end as well. And then your job is to appear, right? And be prepared to go into court and fight. But your life is really going to be the law and not process management. So if you like that idea, give us a call.
And I think there are probably a lot of firms that would really love that. I mean, again, actually, so Ayla just came out with their marketplace study, which they call it something different this year. I can't remember. There's a big section on, law firm, basically sales, M&A, right? Retirement, things like that. So I think there are a lot of folks, who are thinking about this right now. And, there may also be law firms or lawyers that said, you know what, this AI stuff, like, it's not that they don't like it. It's just moving so fast, and they're near retirement, and they're like, I don't want to learn all this stuff. I just want to take what I've built over the last X amount of decades and enjoy my life, or maybe do something else, travel, be with family, etc. There's a lot of that thought process going on right now. So I think it does feel like a good time for it.
Well, and with the difficulties of the hyper enforcement for immigration right now, the statistic that I'm seeing is something like 1,000 to 2,000 small immigration firms will go out of business.
Wow.
And so I'm like, no. We don't need less. We need the people that we have. I just have to make sure that you're comfortable doing what you're doing and that you're not bogged down with the pressures of, well, how do I make payroll? Well, how do I cover marketing? How do I get more people in the door? I have a lot of consultations, but I don't have, people aren't buying. And that's what we want to fix for people so that you can focus on what you do, what you went to law school to do. You didn't go to law school to be a business person. You went to be a lawyer, and taking all those pressures off of you, and I take them on, right? And then I'm like, you just practice law, do a good job. And by the way, when that employment-based case comes in that you don't normally do, guess what? Now you can do it because I have John in Nebraska who's an expert in that area. So your case manager that works there with you will work directly with the client. And John's actually the attorney in our network that will be working the case for you. And so then there's this element of camaraderie and networking that happens, and feeling like you have backup. Solo pracs, they go to places to meet people because they don't have outlets, right? And they're like, I have a mentor, but how often can you really talk to that person?
Right.
Whereas with us, we have built in one of my guys, one of the first firms that I purchased, I'm in the process of purchasing in Dallas. He was my mentor, and he's been doing immigration since 1978. Wow. So he's seen everything. And so he's staying on of counsel, and he is a trainer of trainers. He loves to teach. He loves to show people how things work. He has a little bit of a prickly personality sometimes, but other than that, he's really good. And so having him available for people to talk to, that's invaluable.
Yeah. And not just as a mentor, but also, as you said, if you have a case type that you can't handle, to have someone who's at the ready.
That's right.
You don't have to go out looking for co-counsel or for somebody to take the case on or
just send it out. Yeah. A lot of them just lose the money. It walks out the door.
Exactly. I love it. So really cool. I it sounds like there's so much going on, both from a business standpoint. You're kind of maybe shifting your business model a little bit, perhaps, but at the very least, the product is continuing to be, to grow both as an AI tool, and it sounds like also as a kind of a network function.
Yeah.
As you acquire firms, what do you see? I just have a couple questions left for you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Here. What do you see right now? You mentioned that your AI is a kind of an assistant, whereas other products use AI somewhat a little bit differently. What do you see in the industry? Where do you see technology going? Not that there's one particular direction that it's going. I feel like there are a couple of directions, but like, what are you thinking about or are interested in with technology and immigration?
So a lot of people don't know that the costs of technology production, including mostly power consumption, will surpass what humans use very soon, within the next few years. Data farms, it all costs money to power, right? They're talking about whole cities. It can cost what it costs to do a whole city. It can cost to power a data farm. So here's what I envision will happen. There's every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there creating an AI product right now. And we've already seen costs going up in data processing. Google announced a couple of weeks ago that they're looking at worldwide usage, and they're going to start throttling usage based on X, factors. There's going to be a major consolidation over the next couple of years. A lot of these places that are cropping up as AI, they're gonna die, and the reason they're going to die is because they're going to be priced out of the market. They're not going to be able to cover data costs, and they're going to end up finding themselves like groups that use AI to do full cases. They won't be sustainable, because then when they're trying to lease it out to a law firm and license it out, they're going to have to charge that law firm so much that the law firm's like, I can't pay for that anymore, right? Because you're talking about small places that do $400,000 a year, and you want to charge them, $5,000 a month. You're more than 10% of their total cost, right? They're going to have to price out of the market because they won't be able to cover their own data costs, because data costs are going to skyrocket here very soon, based on power usage. So AI and, especially OpenAI and those others have been subsidized up until now, through investment. And so there's been billions upon billions upon billions of dollars investment thrown into them, and they've basically subsidized usage so that it becomes more affluent, right? It becomes more integrated around the world. But the problem is eventually that catches up. Somebody's got to pay the bill. Well, the consumer's the one that pays the bill. And so what'll happen is there'll be a consolidation. A lot of these places will not be able to charge the prices based on, because most of them are wrappers. Ours is not a wrapper. That's one of the big differences. Ours is a native, right? So and our processing is 90% less than anybody else that I've talked to, our processing costs. And I'm not going to give away the secret sauce, but there's a reason for that. One of the great things about controlling how your technology is built, and using AI when you need to use AI, and not just using it because it's a keyword, right? So there's going to be a consolidation. A lot of these are going to go away. Increase in opportunity, or rather increase in ability, is going to diminish. It's not going to diminish from where it is now, but it's not going to increase, is what I mean. So as other things increase, you're going to see a stagnation. And then people are going to be stuck with tools, and I'm poo-pooing on Logics, but like Logics, right? Where everybody else is moving forward and you're stuck with the tool from DOS, right? And it's what it's going to feel like. And so you're not going to be able to evolve. And then those companies will eventually go out, which means you'll have to change. So getting on board with something that is able to scale, we can have hundreds of millions of users in our system and it won't affect it one bit. Won't slow it down, doesn't do anything, right? And so having a system that can scale, that it keeps data cost at a relatively low level compared to the worldwide function, is the key to success. And that's one of the things we've been focused on for the last year, is making sure that we use it appropriately when it's needed, but not misuse it. Yeah. And some people do that through what's called RAG, retrieval augmentation, right? Which is basically just a glorified chat function where you write out a response that's relevant to various keyword questions. And then so it's not specialized to a person. It's not specific to you, Roman. Right. It's just, this is, if you ask a question that's within this realm, here's your canned answer, right? Well, we didn't want to do that because immigration is very specific. It's me, it's my life. So how do you do that? And I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to give away the secret sauce of how we did it because I don't want anybody copying it. But we've made it to where we can give you a specialized response with 90% less cost. So it's and none of the immigration attorneys that are listening probably will care about what I'm saying as far as that, but it does matter to you because we get saved. We have cost savings. We can have cost saving for you. So right now, if you go get a visalaw.ai account, it costs you for the normal one, it costs you almost $300. And they're drafting things, right? That's what they do. Right. And so with our system, you can have our whole back office, you can have the AI usage, the external AI usage, everything. And it's like $150 a person. Builds your case for you, does the AI. So no one can compete with that, right? And we're still making money. So it's just a different world. And I think people are going to notice the world change over the next year, 2 years. They're going to get accustomed to using AIs. And then all of a sudden they're going to be like, why can't I use this anymore? Or why can I only do 2 cases on here? And then you guys throttle me down or cut off my usage. So token based.
Yeah, and you hear about chips being built that are more efficient. You hear about there are companies that store data farms. I forget the name of the company, but they put these data processing, farms if you want to call them, but data processing centers closer to, let's say, power generation, so that they're not actually spending as much money to bring the power over from where a dam or from a solar field, whatever. And that's interesting. So there are ways that folks are trying to think about this problem, but you're right. The average consumer isn't thinking about that, and they're not thinking about it because the cost is so low that they're not forced to think about it, right? When the cost 10x's, you're going to say,
will.
Wait, what the heck is going on? So,
and you'll become reliant on it, which means that you're like, wait. Now I have to go back to living in the dark without electricity. Right. And that's not, most people can't, that they're already with all the other stresses of a business, having to then make that kind of a change or cut your salary by significant amounts in order to cover the additional costs. Those are things that people don't want to have to think about. There's been a lot that are starting to use solar farms. So they set up the data center and then they surround it with solar power,
right. Exactly.
So that they can generate their own energy. And it's like, that's great. But with the usage increasing, that's my prediction. Just take it or leave it.
It's listen, you're not the only one thinking about this, and folks are trying to solve the problem. Plus, there's also the issue of even if we are able to pay, there's you're still consuming a ton of energy. You're utilizing a ton of water. Energy has to come from somewhere, and so we have to think about the environmental impact of this as well. You live in New Mexico, you talk about Arizona, these places that are experiencing droughts, and how much of that water is being diverted towards AI versus like a farm that grows food. And that's not what this show is about, but it is something to think about because it does have implications, in the sort of physical world that we inhibit. It's not just theoretical about apps.
I think some people think about that, but I don't think they really take it to heart. And I there's a lot of people out there that are like the environment, but then they're on a cargo plane, or a jet plane or whatever, right? And it's like, I know you got to move from one place to the other, but there are tangible ramifications, right? And the amount of damage that we do to the ozone as compared to like methane from cows and stuff like that, there's debatable, right? But at the end of the day, in my opinion, the earth was created. Man was put on it to govern the earth. Therefore, we need to be good stewards of what we were given. Yep. And how you see that stewardship should affect your life, and it should affect your decisions. And so we want to make this the best world possible for as long as possible, for as many people as possible. And so I think we have to look at all of the ramifications.
Amen. I agree. My last question to you is, and although you've kind of answered a little bit now with this, but I'd be curious to hear what you think. I've been asking this question, which is the sort of opposite of, what advice would you give the younger generation or you in 10, 15, 20 years ago? The opposite of it is, what advice are you listening to right now? As you're continuing to build your firm, your business, whatever decisions you're making, what's the advice that's most relevant to you in this moment?
So it wouldn't be verbal; it would be implicit, instead of explicit. I am listening to the advice of the consumer. So a lot of the go-to-market that I was just talking about has shifted because we had already done 2,500 processes through the system. People used 2,500 purchases. People using the system for single processes. And when President Trump was elected, our sales direct to consumer dropped significantly because people were so scared. Because my identifiable group was always the largest group, which is the Spanish-speaking immigrant in the U.S. Makes up about 50% of all immigration. And there are a lot of people that help employment-based. There's 30 companies like mine that do employment-based processing, right? And so they're helping people from India and Europe and other places. And it's like, okay, they got that covered. I want to help everybody else. And how do I do that? Well, our stuff dropped not because of our system. Our stuff dropped because people were scared. So they even go, same reason a lot of law firms will go out of business, because they go to the law firm and they're like, I'm eligible for something. I need this thing, but I'm worried. I've been here 20 years and nobody knows that I'm here. And now I'm going to lift my hand up and be like, hey, I've been here this whole time. And they're worried that somebody's going to come after them because now they've lifted their hand up. So in listening to that, and if they won't do it with a lawyer sometimes because they don't feel the comfort level, then how in the world were they going to do it without a lawyer? So the advice that I'm listening to is, I have to provide them the level of comfort and support that they need at their moment in time. And if I can do that in a way where, for instance, I'm able to buy law firms and I can actually charge less because we're so much more efficient, then I can provide a better service at a better price with better customer service and a better result, faster result usually, not with the government, but at least with getting it submitted. And I can do this for a lesser price, and maybe not just say, hey, I met you at the supermarket and you saw my digital kiosk or you saw one of my people. Maybe that's the way to go. Until people find more comfort, until this hyper enforcement has ended. That's the advice I'm listening to. And so I obviously have people tell me things, right? And I try to consume as much information as possible. It's hard to weed between, foolishness and wisdom, but you try to take in the wisdom and try to leave everything else to the side. And that's hard to do. And the advice I would give young people is probably not to go to law school. And I know that you've kind of left the law in that sense of actual practicing, but it's a good life in the sense of it can definitely provide you a good life if you do it right. But it's also like what the Aztecs called their sin eater, right? Like, you're taking people a lot of times at the worst moment of their life and you're eating all of that and you're absorbing it. And there's only so much that can fit into one person before that person begins to explode. And so it's a foreshadowing of what Jesus was, but not getting religious. But it is that, right? The sin eater. And so therapy is the same way, right? Where it's like you're taking people's worst moments and you're absorbing them, their stress, their pain. And that's hard. And not everybody's cut out for that. So I think really, really, really carefully before taking the leap.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And just to comment on what you mentioned you're listening to, I think that's really, it's in the abstract, the idea there is a reminder to listen to the customer and to be flexible with, what your idea is about your own business, because sometimes the customer implicitly is telling you very clearly without any words where you need to go, what you need to do. And so be open to that, look for that advice. And if you find it, I think that can be a good way to survive, to thrive, to build something new or different, bring value to the industry, et cetera. So
hallelujah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, Michael, this was an awesome conversation. I really appreciate it. I love where we went in the direction of talking about energy and sustainability, because it's such a just power and resource use in general for technology is not something that I talk about often, especially on the show, but is something that is relevant to every single guest that's ever been on the show.
Yeah,
because they're especially into AI based companies, right? So I appreciate that. That was really awesome. Where can folks find you?
So, well, you can look me up on LinkedIn. Actually, the name on my bio right there, Michael Hendricks, JD, MBA. That's how you can find me on there. I do lives. I speak a bunch of languages, so I do lives in Spanish every week on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, on my account, my profile. You can look up Allcanza at allcanza.com. That's more the direct consumer facing. Allcanzatech.com, TECH. Remember, that's Allcanza with 2 L's. It's a mashup. So Allcanza in Spanish is spelled with 1, and it means to achieve or to reach a goal, right? To achieve something. And so we want all, A-L-L, everyone to be able to achieve that goal. That's why Allcanza was born. And so you can look up allcanza.com, allcanzatech.com. You can reach out to me directly at 505-910-4525. And yes, I will answer your call. If I don't answer, it's because I won't recognize. Then leave me a voicemail, please, because I will respond to your call. Even if you just want to talk, I'm more than happy to do that. So, yeah, reach out.
Love it. Thank you. I haven't had a phone call. I mean, I haven't had a phone number get read out on the show yet. So that was the first. I love it.
Yes, sir. Reach out to me.
I love it. Michael, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. Thanks for sharing your story. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Roman.
Thank you. What a great episode. And I'll reiterate, we all have to think about energy usage and how every one of our ChatGPT queries, and I'm, by the way, guilty of this too, using it throughout the day for various things, how much energy that uses, what that means for the industry, what that means for the planet. So just something for folks to think about. Thank you so much to DocketWise, 8 a.m. DocketWise again for being the main sponsor of this episode. So again, DocketWise is an end-to-end immigration case management platform. As we talked about during this episode, they actually started out as a direct-to-consumer product. They expanded into a B2B product for law firms. And so now they provide best-in-class immigration forms. By the way, you can use, if you're using something else for case management or your CRM, a lot of folks combine that with DocketWise for forms. That is the thing that they lead with and are really great at. So DocketWise for immigration forms, questionnaires, industry-leading integrations with a number of different products, including my own, Laborless, great customer service. As I mentioned earlier, DocketWise provides a lot of content and value for the industry by way of a podcast, by way of an ebook, a blog. They actually just had their first conference, I believe, this past year. The parent company did. So, a way to connect in person. So check them out if you're in the market for forms management and immigration forms, or if you're in the market for something broader, immigration case management, et cetera, whether you're a law firm or an in-house team. Check them out at 8am.com/DocketWise. And of course, tell them that you heard about them on the GMI Rocket Show. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you for the comments and the questions. Huge thank you again to Michael for being an amazing guest. And thanks to everyone who tuned in. Appreciate you all. Have a wonderful weekend and stay safe.